following is a production of Cary TV, the Town of Cary's government access channel.
Order the September 23rd meeting of the Cary Town Council. I'd like to point out that Ms. Adcock is not with us this evening because she is out of town caring for an ill family member. At this time, I'll recognize Councilmember Smith for our ceremonial opening. Mr. Smith.
Thank you, Mayor. Please join me in the Pledge of Allegiance. I pledge allegiance
to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
We're at the portion of the meeting where we adopt the agenda. Is there a motion to do so?
So moved.
Second.
There's a motion and a second. Discussion. All in favor, please say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Motion carries unanimously. That takes us to item 2.1, recognitions, reports, and presentations. At this time, I'll recognize Councilmember Bush, who will present the Cybersecurity Month proclamation.
Thank you. Will Terry Yates and Captain Ryan join me at the podium? No laughing. Well, as we all know, the internet is part of everyone's life, every single day. We use the internet here at Town Hall to conduct our business every day, sharing information with our citizens, with our online permitting app for residents and developers and businesses, and all of our council documents, if you've seen them, are also online. Our board applications, our notices, you can even pay your bills and look at your water usage, all online. You may have even seen the following proclamation that I'll also read. Now, since we use the internet at home and at work, we socialize, we shop, some of us stream movies, some of us play games, and we connect with people near and far. However, being constantly connected absolutely brings an increased risk of theft, fraud, and abuse. Now, no one is immune to cybersecurity risks. And so during this upcoming month, October, it's National Cybersecurity Month. I hope that you all will take a few moments to check in with your cyber vulnerability. Like you might check the front door of your house, make sure it's locked. Make sure that your cyber door is also locked and remains so. Oh, it is smaller font now. So this proclamation designates October 2014 as Cybersecurity Awareness Month in Cary. Whereas technology plays a vital role in our daily lives and in the future of our town, state, and nation, the internet provides a simple mechanism for our citizens, schools, libraries, and businesses to perform a variety of tasks, including keeping in touch with families and friends, managing personal finances, performing research, enhancing education, and conducting business. Additionally, businesses and service providers are increasingly reliant on information systems to support financial services, energy, telecommunications, transportation, utilities, healthcare, and emergency response systems. Whereas internet users and our information infrastructure face an increasing threat of malicious cyber attack, loss of privacy from spyware and malware, and significant financial and personal privacy losses due to identity theft and fraud. Whereas there are numerous national initiatives that provide education about cybersecurity, the Stop, Think, Connect campaign uses a common sense approach to help all digital citizens stay safer and more secure online. So this campaign says, stop before you use the internet, take time to understand the risks and learn how to spot potential problems, take a moment and think to be certain that the path ahead is clear, watch for warning signs, and consider how your actions online could impact your safety or your family's. Connect. Enjoy the internet with greater confidence, knowing that you've taken the right steps to safeguard yourself and your computer. Whereas the town's 2008 biennial citizen satisfaction survey indicated that 96% of Cary residents at that time had access to the internet. In the 2012 survey, we learned that almost 55% of Cary residents own smartphones, and of that number, 41% use them for online banking and shopping. In April 2007, the Cary Town Council took proactive steps to increase cybersecurity and citizen awareness of these threats by establishing a computer-related crime activity unit in the police department. Today, Cary's cybercrime unit is the only full-time unit in all of Wake County. It employs 3 full-time and 1 part-time staff who work diligently to protect our citizens' cyber safety and well-being. They also routinely assist other local, state, and federal agencies with cybercrime-related cases. In the past year, these detectives have been assigned over 60 cases. The police department also maintains a web page at thetownofcary.org that contains guidelines and resources to help keep our families and children safe online. And whereas town staff and officials understand that internet security is a shared responsibility in which everyone has a critical role. Raising awareness of cyberspace security in our community will help protect the town's information infrastructure and our citizens. And on behalf of the entire Cary Town Council, I am pleased to partner with the United States Department of Homeland Security, the Multi-State Information Sharing and Analysis Center, and the National Association of State Chief Information Officers, and the National Cybersecurity Alliance, and declare October as National Cybersecurity Awareness Month in Cary. And I urge Cary residents to learn more about cybersecurity and put that knowledge into practice in your home, school, workplace, and business.
Good evening, Council. On behalf of Chief Bazemore and the entire Town of Cary Police Department, we greatly appreciate this recognition and your continued support of our Cyber SIM unit and for all that you've done for us. Thank you very much.
Good evening, council members. On behalf of the Technology Services Department, I want to thank the Cary Town Council for their support in making cybersecurity awareness a top priority here at the Town of Cary. Few of us need be reminded of the impact of cyberspace has on our lives. From daily business transaction to essential government operations and services, cybersecurity is an issue that touches all of us. As more and more daily functions rely on digital systems, the importance and necessity of protecting our computers, mobile devices, and networks will only continue to increase. Thank you again for your commitment and dedication to this critically important issue.
Thank you, Mr. Yates and Captain Ryan, for all you do to raise awareness of cybercrime. Thank you. Ms. Bush, I think that had to be the longest proclamation ever.
had tiny little writing.
We now have reached Public Speaks Out. We've included instructions for speaking at this forum on the printed agenda. If you'd like to speak at Public Speaks Out, please take a seat in the rows to my right that are shown as reserved and follow the instructions on the printed agenda. Public Speaks Out speakers have up to 3 minutes for their comments, and speakers may speak on any topic as long as it's not a public hearing. There's a 3-minute time limit, which I will strictly enforce to be fair to all of our speakers. There's a timer located on the speaker's podium. When the green light turns yellow, that means you have 30 seconds remaining. And when time expires, you'll see a flashing red light. And at that time, I will interrupt you, not trying to be rude, but trying to be fair to all of our speakers. I thank all of our speakers in advance for adhering to our 3-minute time limit. And we ask that if you're speaking for a group, that you allow one spokesperson for that group to reduce repetitive comments. I thank everyone in the audience for respecting that this is a business meeting. Please do not applaud, make remarks from your seat, or anything else that might distract from this meeting. So now's the time for Public Speaks Out, and I will invite the first speaker forward at this time to the podium from the aisle to my right, and give the clerk your completed card and any handouts you have for the council. First speaker, please.
Mayor and council members, I'm Chris Raleigh. I'm here to speak this evening regarding the Stitz South project, which is item 6.2 on your agenda. I'm going to start and finish with one thought. We've done everything that we were asked to do on this project, most of which is well beyond any written requirement or ordinance that's upheld by the town of Cary. At our public hearing in January for this project, we had over 20 protest petitions. The general charge from this council was for us to go work things out with the neighbors. We incorporated several zoning conditions to satisfy the neighbors, as well as reaching a private agreement for those items which were not allowed as zoning conditions. As a result, the protest petitions were removed. Ms. Stitt, the owner of the property, has also agreed that once this zoning is approved, she will subject the property to these private conditions so that they will run with the Stitt South land. At the council meeting in April, this council asked us to do several things. First, they asked us to lower the density. So what we've brought forward tonight, we have reduced the density by 30 units. This density, the density that we're proposing is half of what's allowed on this project. You asked us to provide bigger lots. So for the areas that are adjacent to the reserve, which is the low density to our south, we've increased the lot size to 11,000 square feet. We've also increased the average lot size to 7,000 square feet so that this project would be consistent with a recent condition we were asked to make on the adjacent project, which was Stitt North. We were asked to save the historic house. We've worked with town staff and with Gary Roth to come up with a means to save the historic house on this property. We were told that we were making traffic worse, and the neighbors had recommended that we put in a right turn lane at the intersection of Green Hope School Road and NC 55. This is not a condition that was put in the TIA, which was created by the town's consultants, but we're still offering this condition tonight. This is a good project with excellent conditions. It has generous buffers. It connects dead-end greenways. The density is at the low end of the spectrum. We're saving a historic house. We're making needed traffic improvements that were not recommended for us to make. With that said, I'm going to end where I started. We've done everything that we were asked to do, most of which is beyond any requirement or ordinance that the town of Cary upholds. And on behalf of Mrs. Stitt, who's well into her 90s and cannot be here tonight due to her health, she's watched everyone around her fulfill their right to develop their property according to the rules. Although she loves this property, she's ready to fulfill her right to follow the rules and have her property developed as well. She asks for your support and that you would approve this request this evening. Thank you.
Thank you. Next speaker, please.
Good evening. My name is Lyle Rickash, and I'm following up on the same project, the Stitt property. The developer asked that we take a look at the intersection that Chris referenced, the NC 55 and Green Hope School intersection, and see what could be done to improve congestion at this location. The traffic study that Ramey Kemp, the on-call consultant, did not require any specific improvements there beyond what has been completed by Batcher Track, which was the lengthening of the northbound left turn lane and some signal timing improvements. Today, the intersection overall operates in the BC range. It's projected to go to the DF range with significant delays and queues. On the eastbound approach, that's what folks experience mainly in the morning, worse conditions. As all these, there was, I think, about 12 approved developments that were in the Ramey Kemp study. As these developments come online, you can expect the delays and queues to worsen to a point where I think now folks are cutting the corner in the southwest corner and using Warren Ridge Lane to bypass the signal to go southbound on NC 55. So we've been working with the town staff, NCDOT, the developer, to come up with a solution here to alleviate some queues and also to free up that right turn lane so we can overlap it in the signal so they can go on a green arrow when the lefts go northbound. And so we come up with this plan that actually cuts the delays and queues in half. And so we feel good about this solution. Ramey Kemp ran the numbers, and so we agree with their solution, their analysis. So this improvement is proposed constructed as part of the development of the Stitt property. Based on our preliminary and design analysis that you have in front of you, this improvement will improve existing conditions and provide an improved level of service when the approved traffic and Stitt traffic are generated. If it's not constructed, then the delays and queues will continue to increase at this location. Just for reference, I think the cost estimate for this improvement is around $275,000. So it's not a simple fix, but it will greatly enhance conditions at this location. Taking any questions? Do you have any? Thank you.
Thank you. Next speaker, please. Anyone else for Public Speaks Out? Okay. We have public hearings coming up soon.
Good evening, Council. My name is Dan Marchenko. I am the founder and president of Cary Players, Community Theater. And I wanted to come tonight to say thank you for your support of the arts in Cary. I founded the organization back in 2001, and over the last 13 years, we've produced over 41 live stage productions in Cary, seen by close to 30,000 people. And we've included, in the process, we have incorporated the efforts of over 1,000 unique volunteers coming out as actors, set crew, painters, ushers, ticket takers, and so forth. It has been, I hope, a benefit to the community and something that improves the life of Cary, of Cary citizens. We use the Cary Arts Center now, and we do our shows there. And we want to thank you for continuing to support that effort in Cary. It is something that we have a passion for. All of us are volunteers. We don't do this to make any personal profit. We simply just want to produce live theater in Cary and give folks an outlet for their artistic expression. I also wanted to invite you guys out because our season starts this Friday night with our first show. It's called Wait Until Dark. And I have some little flyers here. I'll leave them with you, and you guys, we'd love to see you guys come out and see the show, see the efforts that we're doing with the funding that you're helping to provide to Cary Players, and come see that it's a good thing. We're trying to do a great thing here, and I want you guys to be able to see that and see the positive impact that you're having on the community by supporting these types of organizations. So that's all I had to say. I'm not here to ask for anything, just to thank you very much for all that you do. Should I leave these with you?
Thank you, and thank you to Cary Players for all that you do. Next speaker for Public Speaks Out. Anyone else for Public Speaks Out? Seeing no one will close public speaks out. That moves us to the consent agenda. This is item 4, if you're following along. For the benefit of people watching our meeting on TV, I'm going to take a moment to review our consent agenda items. Please keep in mind that one vote approves all of these items. On the consent agenda, we have minutes. We have the owner-initiated annexation petitions for Wake County Board of Education, Young Family Timber Holdings, LLC, and Triangle Brick, Louise Clayton. Appointments to the Historic Preservation Commission, rezoning and comprehensive plan consistency statement for Kensington Place. Fire Station Number 2, Duke Energy progress request for utility easement across town-owned property. Traffic signal installation at Marsville Parkway and Green Level Church Road. Lease agreement update for Suite 230 at 122 East Chatham Street. Jordan Lake aeration mixing system procurement, and a tax report. I would like to pull items 4.6 and 4.7, which are the rezoning 14 REZ 11 for Kensington Place and the accompanying comprehensive plan consistency statement for discussion. And I would ask that council members let me know at this time other items they'd like to pull for discussion. Okay, then I would entertain a motion to approve the agenda, consent agenda as amended.
So moved.
Second.
There's a motion and a second. Discussion. All in favor, please say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Motion carries unanimously. We're now at public hearings. Same rules apply for public speaks out, apply for public hearings, except for speakers have up to 5 minutes instead of 3. The first item, or the first public hearing, is for an owner-initiated annexation. Mr. Nicholas of our staff will present this item. Then we'll open the public hearing, and council may take action on this item. Mr. Nicholas.
Thank you. Good evening, council. This request is for annexation of 1 acre of property located at 7425 Wake Road, approximately 450 feet west of the intersection with Green Level Church Road. The property is in Cary's ETJ, and it's currently zoned residential 40. The request is not associated with a rezoning or development plan.
Okay, very good. This time I'll open the public hearing and invite the first speaker to approach the podium. Anyone to speak for the public hearing on this owner-initiated annexation? Seeing no one, I'll close the public hearing. Open it up to council members for questions, comments, or motion.
Make a motion to approve annexation petition 14A10.
There's a motion.
Second.
And a second. Discussion. All in favor, please say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Motion carries unanimously. Thank you, Mr. Nicholas. We're at item 5.2, the Keller property rezoning request. We're going to hear the staff's report. We're going to allow the applicant to explain the request. We're going to conduct a public hearing, and council will not take action on this item. Instead, we're going to refer it to the Planning and Zoning Board for their recommendation. Ms. Grannon of our staff will introduce this item. Ms. Grannon.
Thank you. Good evening. For your consideration is a request to rezone approximately 13.39 acres on 2 parcels located on Stevens Road. Subject property is shown here, highlighted in yellow. Cary's land use plan designation for the property is medium-density residential. There's a small portion shown in green, which follows a stream buffer, which is designated as parks and open space on the land use plan. The existing zoning is residential 40. The applicant has proposed residential multifamily conditional use. Conditions proposed by the applicant would limit the use to townhomes and to neighborhood recreation, and to set a maximum density of 8 dwelling units per acre. As mentioned, the site is impacted by a stream buffer according to our GIS maps, and field determination of such features would be required at the time of development plan review. Cary's Parks, Recreation, and Cultural Greenways plan shows that there is a greenway trail on the north portion of the subject property. Cary's Transportation Plan identifies Stevens Road as a collector road, and that would require a 30-foot streetscape at such time a development is proposed. There is a transit route located on Piney Plains Road. And this slide shows you the notification within 800 feet of the subject property. There were several protest petitions received. Those shown in blue would not be classified as valid because they are further away than 100 feet from the property. There were enough parcels highlighted in yellow that were within the 100-foot boundary, and there is a valid protest. This is a summary of the protest concerns, and the number beside the item just shows you the number of times that that issue came up in the protest petition. So traffic was the number one concern, the density, road design, questions about how Stevens Road would be improved in the future, whether or not it would have sidewalk. A couple of comments about the streetscape buffer width, a few comments about stormwater management and environmental impacts, and just 2 comments about the use itself. One citizen was concerned about apartments or condominiums, but the zoning condition would limit the use to townhomes. This concludes staff's presentation. I'd like to call upon the applicant, and then following the public hearing, I'm available for your questions.
Thank you. This time I'd invite the applicant forward.
Good evening, Mr. Mayor, council members. My name is Michael Dean Chadwick. I am the applicant for this rezoning for the Keller family property. We've had a couple meetings with the neighbors and do understand some of their concerns, none of which surprise us a whole lot. We are looking at doing townhomes on this particular track. The concerns that I think have, we have just finished and completed a rezoning 2 small parcels away from this. And, the concern there was so much of their concern was stormwater. And during one of our recent big rains, I actually went out and played in the woods to watch the stormwater to see what it was doing. And clearly there's nothing to stop any water flowing down Stevens Road and on into Wellington. So we're very sensitive to that. We're sensitive to the need for the probably oversizing 1 or 2 of the stormwater ponds and actually make them more of a feature. There's also been some discussions about the widening of Stevens Road itself. Well, by the time we finish this piece and what we're doing down the street, that's going to take in a big chunk of the widening that'll take care of Stevens Road. And traffic is an issue, and we're working with the neighbors trying to come up with the best solution for Forest Park, which is currently planned to come through our rezoning, and unless there's some other direction, that would certainly be a relief to it. The need, I think, for continued and ongoing discussion with the neighbors, and not only just the ones that have a valid or an invalid protest petition, but all the neighbors would be invited for open and transparent and frank conversations. And we're open to talking about density. We're open to talking about the buffers that we've proposed. And so while this is a public hearing, it's a little early to get into all that, but I just want to let you know that we're open to discussing this with the neighbors. And I don't want to take up everybody's time because I have 10 minutes, but I'll leave that for the preachers. Thanks.
Thank you. This time I'll open up the public hearing for this rezoning request, and I would invite the first speaker forward.
Am I on this side or this side?
Your left.
Thank you. My name is Tracy Philomena. I live at 2313 Stevens Road. I've been at the podium before speaking on behalf of the other rezoning. My concern with this rezoning is primarily density and traffic. I am not anti-development, but I am anti-townhome, condominium, and high-density development. I would absolutely support single-family detached dwellings on this property, but I do not support townhomes. Traffic is a concern, especially considering that the other property rezoned at R8. I would like to see something fairly similar going in this property. We have a lot of single-family homes on the street, and I like that. Density is a concern, schools, and impact to the schools. It seems to be the pattern of Cary these days to be pretty proactive in the piece of high-density development, and while I like that, I don't think it's a good fit for our space. And I would highly encourage the council, the applicant, and everything to be considered for single-family detached homes. I think that helps address the density. I think that helps address traffic. I think that helps address stormwater. And I think that also helps address school impacts. Thank you.
Thank you. Next speaker, please.
Hello, I'm James Center. I live at 2317 Stevens Road. I'm here to address the council tonight about both sections that Mr. Chadwick wants to develop. I think we have to been a little bit quick about taking Mr. Chadwick for his words. For example, on the zoning of 13 RZ 32, he said the traffic on 19 homes would be 23 a.m., 24 p.m. peak hours. He didn't include the connection of Forest Parkway to Stevens Road. I went to Forest Parkway and townhomes and counted 300 empty spots during the midday. I estimated about half of those would use Stevens Road as a connector. This volume of traffic will require traffic study. He also said rezoning will not have any adverse effects on Stevens Road. Stevens Road needs to be widened to 60 foot to handle this traffic. I believe that Mr. Chadwick also had a falsehood when he reported in the zoning staff report of the Keller property on September 23rd, where he states there is no indication of floodplains, wetlands on this site. According to Billy Lee, the town of Cary Stormwater Management said that there is a registered wetland on this property. Mr. Chadwick also reported the state on 107 dwelling units. He proposed rezoning anticipated generating 55 AM cars and 64 PM cars on such trips. I think he's way out of the ballpark there. I think you got at least 2 people that's going to go to work. You're going to have children going to school. I think you can at least double that number at the minimum. So by the study of both of those, we're at about 250 cars an hour at peak times on Stevens Road that is 20 foot wide, 4 inches. We can't just put all this traffic on the road and nowhere to go. Also, the proposed zoning is likely to serve adverse impacts on the natural environment, the wildlife, and the vegetation on Stevens Road. I think Mr. Chadwick just wants to tell you what you want to hear, and so he can destroy a neighborhood and then move on with his profits. I'm opposed to changing the property from R40 to R8. I feel like I have been told half-truth and adverse impacts on the residents of Stevens Road. I feel strongly that Cary Planning and Zoning and Town Council should relook at both 14 REZ 23 and 13 REZ 32 for false and inaccurate information. I'm totally against a forced road connection without widening Stevens Road from end to end instead of a piece milling here and narrowing there, then widening here and for half a mile of road between the Chadwick properties. And I appreciate y'all's time.
Thank you. Next speaker, please.
Good evening, Council. My name is Lonnie Brooks. I live at 2309 Stevens Road. I grew up on that road and moved away. Now I'm back. And so I've seen a lot of changes happen on that road. And I've also seen the subdivision that was built on it added in. And that, of course, has brought a lot more traffic than what we're used to. Okay. And getting out at the top of the street at Piney Plains and Stevens Road, has now become worse, okay, because back years ago, Tryon Road, Piney Plains used to be a 2-lane road. Now it's a 4-lane road. And so you're going to be bringing in more traffic, and then you're talking about putting townhomes at the top. You know, that's just bad. It's too much for that little road for what people have been used to, and you're taking away from the wildlife. And some people haven't talked about that, but we have deer that run, and they have certain trails. In fact, I helped my neighbor work. He's putting up a fence, and we let the deer a trail to go through because he was thinking about bringing his fence all the way back. So we have deer that travel through there and families, and the traffic is just going to be too much for that street. And I'm just totally against it. If you instead of building townhomes, if you have less people, you're going to have less cars. We already have enough traffic on the roads. If you haven't driven lately, it's terrible. And you build more, so more people are going to keep on coming. So, you know, we should consider to do that to a minimum. And that's it. Thank you.
Thank you. Next speaker, please.
Good evening, council members. My name is Patrick McCabe, and I'm currently serving on the Prestwick HOA board. First, I want to say that I'm not opposed to development of the property in question. I'm opposed to rezoning of the property to a higher density. This is for 2 main reasons. Number 1 is the already higher density in the area, and number 2, the unfeasibility of Stevens Road being a corridor for this increased density. Point number 1 is the surrounding areas has already been greatly impacted by higher density projects. The Crossroads area is a poster child for a high density with extreme retail growth, in addition to businesses, hotels, townhomes, cluster homes, and so on. This negatively has impacted traffic, noise, water drainage, and tranquility in the area. On Piney Plains, there is an extensive apartment complex across the street, and 2 more right down the road. Around the corner, another new apartment complex is up, and there is more retail and medical offices. Each new higher density project adds a lot more traffic and associated noise, with addition of more people and clear cutting of trees, which are natural sound barriers. Point number 2. In Stevens Road is already incapable of handling current traffic it receives. At the entrance of the road, 2 cars can barely fit, and there is congestion at the school bus pickup and drop-off times. This traffic will shortly increase the already improved new homes to be built and road cut through to the very large Wellington community. Even with modifications, Stevens Road does not have the breadth and depth to handle multiple cars waiting at the corner to turn out, not to mention the amount of cars exiting and entering the proposed new community's entrance. It is inconceivable that the entrance to a new community of such high density could even be proposed or considered for Stevens Road, especially considering the proximity of Prestwick subdivision houses facing the proposed entrance and the lack of the road footage before and after the entrance. The traffic on Stevens Road will greatly impact those who live deeper in Stevens Road, who will have trouble getting access to the Piney Plains, especially at high volume times. The associated noise, water drainage, and reduction of natural area, in addition to the burden to the current residents, even when all ordinances are followed, we have experienced water drainage issues from development. The higher density that is being requested further complicates these issues, multiplying the burdens. The unchecked growth continues without the addition of natural areas, walkways, protected lands, or parks to buffer the noise and increase in buildings and pavements. All of this negatively impacts the enjoyment and ease of life in a town that in the past is ranked as one of the best places to live. We are now being surrounded by higher density growth. We experience an increase in traffic and an increase in noise from Piney Plains and Tryon Road. As Stevens Road and Piney Plains becomes more and more crowded, we cannot safely leave our subdivision to go for a walk, bike ride, or enjoy outside. It is noisy and congested and dangerous. This is all unnecessary. These areas can be developed in a wise and citizen-friendly way. The current zoning would allow for that in a more cohesive and thoughtful way. Thank you. I appreciate your attention and efforts to keep Cary a great place to live.
Thank you. Next speaker, please.
Hello, my name's Nancy Center, and I live at 2317 Stevens Road. I'll be impacted by both the Keller property and the property right across the street where they're developing. I'm not opposed to development, just the high density, especially on the Keller Road being at the end of our road. Like the gentleman said before, the school buses there, it's hard to get in and out. It's hard to have everybody standing there, and just putting more traffic on that road would be very dangerous. I also, Mr. Chadwick, I also think that, we've heard a couple of things that just aren't true, actually, with the traffic volumes, with the drainage. The drainage ditch coming onto my property when it rains, I don't know where he stood on the road when he looked, but that drain pipe is just gushing with water in a normal rainfall, going straight towards Wellington Park. So when you interrupt taking out all those trees across the street to build, I can't even imagine the water coming towards our property and to Wellington Park. I think that's a big issue. Also, we do know that there is a wetlands, a registered wetlands on the Keller property. In Mr. Chadwick's report, it says there is no wetlands. So, I don't think all the truth is being told here, and I'm concerned with that. Again, I'm not opposed to development here. I'm just opposed to the high density. I don't think Stevens Road can handle it. Plus, Mr. Chadwick has said he's got one piece of property, he's going to have to put some sidewalks in, widen that area. Then there's like at least 4 houses, probably 0.3 miles, that it will be narrow again. And then he's going to widen it again where the Keller property is. So without a full, development of the street, that is just going to be very hard to maneuver. Like the gentleman said before, too, you can't walk out there. Even if Mr. Chadwick puts a 50-foot sidewalk in front of each of his developments, what's happening to the rest of the street? The road is not being developed appropriately to handle this neighborhood, and it will very much impact our neighborhood. So I'm very concerned. Thank you for listening.
Thank you. Next speaker, please.
Hi, good evening. My name is Sarah Jacks. I'm the treasurer of the Prestwick HOA Board, and I'm also a resident at 921 Bentberry Way. Let me start by saying that I appreciate all of you being here, and that I appreciate that you're representing our concerns and not the developer's concerns. I want to start by discussing the density concern. It significantly impacts the safety of the current residents and also those future residents when this property is developed, particularly the children, due to increased traffic on the roads that are incapable of handling the construction, but then also the long-term future resident traffic. Street remediation is just not feasible under this proposed zoning request. The impact of the proposal is just not appropriate for a one-way in and one-way out street. I would invite each of the council members, if you have not been to this area, to actually come and visually see the properties and where it relates to the entrance to the Prestwick neighborhood, as well as those homes that are on Stevens Road. The proposed density is just too great considering the overall plan for developing surrounding areas next to these properties, and it's inconsistent with the surrounding neighborhood and current homes. And I believe it's also inconsistent with the town of Cary's development plan. I think rezoning these properties is going to set a precedent supporting denser developments to the surrounding properties. I think this sets the tone for what's to come. The proposed development provides insufficient water and stormwater management, whereby the current plans will significantly impact the Prestwick subdivision and even potentially cause the need for us to remedy our own stormwater management. I will also say that the proposed depth of the planned buffer does not adequately provide a visual barrier from the new development. It also impairs the ability of current residents to quiet enjoyment of their properties. And I would like to ask actually the Prestwick neighbors, if you're here, to please stand up. While it may not be 100%, there's a significant number of us for a small division of 37 homes. And while we may be a small neighborhood, we do have a very loud voice. And while we are small, we will be mostly directly impacted by this. And I would like to see additional efforts from the development other than the one required meeting with the neighborhood to actually work together. Thank you.
Thank you. Next speaker, please.
Good evening. I'm Heather Connolly, and I live at 1708 Callendale, which is at the very start of the Prestwick neighborhood that borders onto Stevens, so I'm at the very end. You know, when I chose this neighborhood 3 years ago, I liked it because Cary was a great town. When I was moving back to the southeast, I was very excited and found this neighborhood, and it provided a single family residence neighborhood that we could live in and enjoy all of the amenities also offered by the area, with the crossroads being very close and amenable. But what we want to keep here is the actual essence of the community and the development in the area. You know, I wouldn't be standing here tonight if the developer had proposed single-family homes detached with a current density that we're used to seeing along Stevens Road. I think that's what we're all asking here for the reasons you've heard over and over tonight of traffic, of stormwater management, of just overall density. And that would be my request to the council, is that we really consider the essence of the neighborhoods around there and keeping that essence and going with a lower density development. Development's great. It's what progresses communities and it's what draws us all in. But it has to be done with a cognizance of what's there and appropriate for the area. So I appreciate your time tonight, and thank you.
Thank you.
Thanks.
Next speaker, please.
Hi, my name is Virginia Griffin. I've been before y'all many times before, but I'm not here tonight to complain. I have lived on Stevens Road. In fact, I live at the very bottom of Stevens Road, which they have said will impact me the most. I am definitely 100% for this development, and I'll tell you why. Because there is probably 30 or 40 acres on Stevens Road that is eventually going to be developed. That's life. Adam and Eve probably didn't want anything developed either. But this is just life. It's going to be developed. As far as Mr. Chadwick is concerned, I don't know if any of these people have been on the internet and looked at his record. I don't know if they've been to any of his communities and looked at his homes that he has built before. They're nice neighborhoods. I think he's been highly praised for some of his neighborhoods. Granted that the road's got to be widened, I think that's y'all's decision. I don't think that's Mr. Chadwick's decision. I think there are people in Prestwick who are complaining. Nobody on Stevens Road complained about Prestwick being developed. Not one complaint was mentioned. Their kids play in the streets. They play out, the street's not wide. They park their cars on the street. Listen, they can't have everything. You can't have everything. And all on that side of Stevens Road, except for 2 houses, is going to one day be developed, including me probably. And I will cry and say, please don't. No, I won't. I'll be fine with it. But be careful what you wish for, because they could easily put a fire station there. There's enough land to put a school there. There's enough land to put a medical building there. And you're talking about more traffic and more density. And so sometime you have to step back and say, wait a minute, what do I want, and am I going overboard on this? And they're talking about 30 houses, and they're talking about neighborhoods. There are no neighborhoods except Prestwick. There are not any other neighborhoods on Stevens Road. We're all single-family homes, and so I don't know what the complaint is. I mean, if they want a thing built for the school children to sit under, they want the road not to come out in their neighborhood so that the lights shine. Somebody said last time that they didn't want the construction workers whistling at their wives. I mean, I'm going like, holy moly, what in the world? Okay, there are a lot of things that I don't want, but it's going to happen, and if Mr. Chadwick doesn't do it, then somebody's going to come in with something different, and we've already run one developer off that wanted to put 39 houses up in that area, and we ran him off. Well, I didn't, they did. And so you're talking, you got to figure out what you're going to fight for. And eventually, every bit of that land on that side of the road is going to be developed. It's not anything I can do or any of these people back here can do. Life goes on, and that's what's going to happen. But I would recommend that these people that are degrading Mr. Chadwick go on the internet, look at his record, look at what he's done, go to his communities, look at his houses, and then decide whether you're going to degrade him. That's just not right. Don't do it. And is anybody here on the Planning Commission?
This is a town council planning.
Okay.
Commission.
Well, I just wanted to thank the Planning Commission for taking good care of me this week. So thank you very much. And
Thank you.
good luck.
Thank you. Next speaker, please.
Distinguished members of the council, I am Saru Sachdeva. I stay on 1705 Callendale Avenue, and I'm here today to state my reasons for opposing the proposed rezoning of Keller property. I'm also here to seek your help by not approving the proposed rezoning for townhomes. We have a total of 37 single-family homes in 12.99 acres, which translates to about 2.84 dwellings per acre. The proposed 8 dwellings per acre are almost 3 times the existing scenario. Respected members of the council, we strongly feel proposed rezoning is not in line with the current residential density and small neighborhood appeal. Secondly, Stephens Road simply cannot take the traffic generated during and after the construction period, and it will have serious safety issues. It's a single entrance with a dead end and cannot, in any probability, accommodate the anticipated traffic. Last but not the least, we are really concerned about the environmental concerns. The proposed rezoning will have adverse effects on the natural environment. In order to make room for the new development, we'll have to cut down a lot of very old trees. Thanks a lot, and I really appreciate your time. Thank you.
Next speaker, please.
Thank you for the opportunity, council members. I live in the Prestwick community on Bentbury Way. I'll keep it very simple and short.
Give us your name, please.
My name is Pathik Patel, sorry.
Thank you.
I'm on Bentbury Way. Density and traffic, again, I just want to keep it short. 2.44 was the approved density 3 months ago to the neighboring property. Our property is 3 point something, and the new one is 8. So 2.44, 3.5 or less, and the right next one, 8. So that says something. And number 2, every time there has been exception to a traffic study. The previous property 3 months ago did not meet the threshold. Traffic study was not done. This one, again, does not meet the threshold. Traffic study was not done. But combined, a traffic study is due. You know, every time it doesn't meet the benchmark, but together, the whole road needs to be looked together, including the future collector. Stephens is a collector station, collector road. So I would urge you to consider the plan again, and the plan, what we have today, is not feasible. Lower density, I'm all up for it. Thank you.
Thank you. Next speaker, please.
Hello. I'm Monty Maney, 2416 Stevens Road. I've lived on Stevens Road for 35 years as a homeowner. When I came to that road, the population of Cary was around 50,000, and now it's a little probably over 150,000. So things change, and they're always going to change. One of the speakers said, be careful what you wish for, and that's true. Several years ago, and this is my main point, that piece of Keller property was part of another rezoning controversy. The reputable builder was going to build 30 to 40 houses on that property, and most of the people who are protesting tonight also protested that. They didn't want it. I kept saying, be careful what you wish for. They pitched a big tizzy about it, and now look where we are. I am completely for this project. Michael Dean is a reputable builder. He's got a great plan. It's a small part of a bigger vision, and I think ultimately it's going to be a huge asset to Cary. So I would like for you to consider approving this project.
Thank you. Next speaker, please.
It's been a while since I've been here. You guys look fantastic. So I don't know what the secret is, but if you could share with the rest of us, that would be great. One of the things that's...
For the record, give us your name. We know who you are.
I'm sorry. My name is Kelly Comiskey, and I live in Cary, North Carolina. Do I have to give my address too, or is that 832 Ventnor Way? So anyhow, one of the downsides of having two public hearings so close together is that I think the best kept secret in Cary is going to get out, right? My favorite part of living where I do is I can go to Crossroads and go shopping and get home before my husband even wakes up and knows what I've done, right? So it's a brilliant place to live. But I'm the T in the Bentbury, if you look on the street, right? So of everybody here, I'm probably the least impacted in my neighborhood. It's far enough away that whatever they build is not going to impact me near as much as the properties that are abutting. I did file a protest petition only because I think there is a need to do a redo with the developer. I think that the density that he's proposing is a lot, but I'm kind of the mindset, what I can't see doesn't really bother me. So, and I've used this example, I really don't care if he puts a apartment building in the shape of a pink elephant, right? As long as I can't see it from where I'm living, and every day I can't see it, it's probably not going to bother me, right? So, so I think if, for me, and I've told him this as well, if he could come down on the density and maybe thicken up the buffer, then it would be something that I would probably support and remove my protest petition. Some of the other things, though, that I do want to clarify, our road is at some point going to need additional connectivity, whether it's today or 20 years from now. I'm finishing up his road that goes through to Wellington, and I can feel Ruth's daggers coming into the back of my head, right? Right now, the bus stop for our kids, and I don't let my kid ride the bus because of where it's located, is at Piney Plains and Stevens Road. And that's a busy stop for 8-year-olds and 7-year-olds to be standing out, waiting for a bus. If we had one of the reasons we can't have the bus come through is because they can't turn around. They can't turn around in our neighborhood, and they can't turn around on Stevens. So if they were to build the connectivity, all of a sudden that becomes not an issue. The bus can start to pick kids up in our neighborhood. So hopefully, you know, I've heard some rumors that he's trying to get out of building the connectivity. So hopefully, as a part of building this new project, that he would finish up his connectivity either into Wellington or figuring out another way for our neighbors and the rest of the residents to get out. You know, I sat down yesterday and met with the developer, and I think he's a genuine person. I do have some concerns that I felt like I was strong-armed a little bit. There were some threats that, you know, if this plan doesn't go through, a 7-story apartment building would be built, a 7-story office building would be built, or that his person would get so irritated he'd just come put single family and make it all rental. You know, I think probably we need to get out of that business and just sell what you have to sell and don't threaten us, and let's just work together as a community. And so I think really that there needs to be a start over with the developer and the Prestwick folks. Everybody needs to come to the table, be willing to work together and come up with something that we can all live with, and then I think maybe we can go from there. But I do think the sides are very far apart. really strongly far apart. I don't know. I think I'm in the small minority, maybe the one or two in our neighborhoods that could live with townhouses. But I do think that there needs to be a do-over. And last but not least, something that just came up about the Prestwick neighborhood from one of the previous speakers. When Prestwick was proposed, I was actually on the Planning and Zoning Board, and I voted for it, right? One of the things that I think that is very important to me is I myself would have no problem putting his plan behind somebody else's house when I was on P&Z. And for me to have a problem, I think that would be hypocritical for me to oppose it just because it happens to be in my backyard. So I think that's one of the things that that maybe is a little bit different for me than it is for everybody else. But also just to clarify with the other neighbors, there were people in Stevens that protested Prestwick. I mean, they thought that we were going to be the scourge of the earth. How dare we put single-family housing on that property? So, you know, things change, people learn, and just like I said, if you hide the townhouses behind a thick enough buffer, nobody will see it. They'll move on, and it'll just be another day. And that's all I have to say. Thank you, guys. You look great. Take care.
Thanks. Next speaker.
Boy, I cannot remember the last time I've been in front of you groups. It's probably been, what, 2 years? I'm Ruth Merkel. I live at 105 Victoria Station Court in Wellington Park. And I just want it known for the record that I'm speaking strictly for myself. I'm not here on behalf of my homeowners association. She will be speaking next, our president. As you're aware, you know, the developer did contact me about this rezoning because he knows I live in the neighboring community. And I agreed to meet with him because I wanted to hear personally from him what his plans were and how it would impact the residents of Wellington Park, where I live, as well as my neighbors in Prestwick and Stevens Road. My personal concern is with road connectivity, since my lot is next to where a future connector road is already in a Town of Cary plan. So for that reason, I was interested in meeting with him. To his credit, he has offered to speak to anyone who's willing to work with him. And I know for a fact that Mr. Chadwick has spent a considerable amount of his time speaking with homeowners and the town about his plan. So I asked him to meet with some of my neighbors, and we talked about what our concerns were, you know, particularly connectivity and stormwater flooding. And these are legitimate concerns, and they have to be addressed. He has assured me that he will work with us on these issues, and I hope the town will do likewise. You know, we do know that stormwater is a very big problem all around us, and we're hoping that it can be taken care of. And again, we have the assurances that he will work with us to do that. I also know that you can't please all the people all the time. The people who are most affected by traffic and stormwater will continue to be the most vocal against this development. Yet I truly believe that both the developer and the town of Cary really wants to provide a good product that most of us are willing to live with. And let's face it, you know, Cary is growing. We are seeing an influx of young professionals and senior citizens who want to make Cary their home. These are good people who want to have home ownership but can't afford to buy single homes. I've looked at the specs for this development, and if it's done right, I think it has the potential to really provide affordable but quality housing for the kinds of individuals that I want to be my neighbors. For that reason, I personally support this rezoning. If the property can be developed so that runoff to the neighboring properties is reduced or, God forbid, even eliminated, and traffic's directed away from Wellington Park and Stevens Road as much as possible, I believe you will find more supporters for this development, for this rezoning and its future development. I just want to say again, thank you for all you do for the citizens of Cary.
Thank you. Next speaker, please.
Hi, my name is Jennifer Maxon, and I am the Wellington Park Homeowners Association president. I'm not opposed to this rezoning. I think that given all the other options that we've seen that could happen on Stevens Road over the last few years, things have popped up. This is one of the better ones we've seen. I think that it could be a real asset in that area if it's done properly. I think the zoning might be a little bit higher than what we are looking for, but also know that they're always going to try to go for the most bang for their buck. So I know that that will probably not be exactly what we end up with. My big concern is the water. Right now, the pond that we have that sits on Stevens Road in between Forest Park Drive is a huge concern. We frequently, and it doesn't need to be a 100-year or 50-year storm the way we're always told, have overflows. Our dam gets overflown, our emergency spillway is frequently washed out. And these are with common everyday storms. From the development on Route 1, on 1 that expanded, and from the Crossroads expansion that happened on that end of Piney Plains, we are just taking everybody's water now. And we honestly cannot take one drop more. So we really would appreciate if you could reevaluate your stormwater management plan for this area, or have them reevaluate how much water that their ponds can hold and maybe expand the size, because we can't take any more. We're already, the area that has been further down where our spillway goes into, there's been significant erosion. We have significant sediment coming into our Lake Wellingborough that is also shares a dam with the Kids Together Park. I'm sure, I can't tell you how many times I've seen that closed because of flooding. Something has to be done, and we can't do it. It's beyond what we as a homeowners association can handle. So we're really asking for your help and to make sure that the problem is being at least somewhat looked into and managed, and hopefully, definitely not made even more of a concern for us. And that's all I have to say. Thank you very much.
Thank you. Next speaker, please.
Hello, Council. My name is William Golden. I live at 940 Bentbury Way. Excuse me, I feel a little sick tonight. But I wanted to come out here. I feel it's very important that I come out and express my disapproval of this project. My bedroom lies about 12 feet, well, I guess 22 feet away from Stevens Road. My daughters as well. I have a 9-year-old daughter and a son, and the density problem and everything everyone said, you got to come see it for yourself. So I would invite you guys to come out, see it for yourself, especially during when school is going to school and letting out. I think it's a huge problem, and that's all I wanted to say for tonight. Thank you for your time.
Thank you. Next speaker, please.
How y'all doing? Hey, my name's Craig Felke. I live at 2220 Stevens Road, and my main concern is what's going to happen to my property. My property's on both sides of what Mr. Chadwell wants to develop. My deed says I own to the center of the road, and I got some big trees in my yard, and I know if you do develop, somebody's going to come through there and take my 160 foot. I just don't want my trees cut down. I'd rather them be moved. I mean, they do move stuff. And as far as the density, yeah, I think that's a lot of houses per acre, but nobody considered, the traffic plan or what's going to happen there. Everybody just assumes it's okay. And that's all I have to say.
Thank you.
And I've been living there over 30 years, and my wife's a Stevens, and that's, she's one of the last members that did live on our street. So we have 5 generations living on that property, and I don't want my property just being taken. I mean, it's going to be a problem because, of course, like you say, you got to make roads wider. He's going to go back 60 foot on one side, and to get the color property 60 foot on the other, and that's going to leave mine sticking out. I mean, it's obvious something's going to happen. I mean, I'm not ignorant about it, but I wish somebody consider just assuming it's not easy just to cut the tree down and make it quick. I mean, I like my stuff moved. I got my own buffers there. I got my own fence. My own lily cypress trees been planted for years. Sugar maple trees out there. And thanks again.
Thank you. Next speaker, please.
Sweet gum.
Hi, I'm Michael Crane. I'm at 1728 Callendale Avenue, and I am probably a little bit past the blue zone. But my main concern is stormwater management. my house is in front of or there's a retention pond behind my house which takes the water from Stevens Road down Callendale Avenue. So with the development of what's proposed now, Stevens Road will probably be widened, which means more blacktop, which means more water runoff down to Callendale Avenue, down to our storm drains, which will back up into my backyard. And this occurs basically not just these 50 or 100-year rainstorms, mainly afternoon thunderstorms that we get during the summer each year. And I brought photographs of before and after what the retention pond looks like after a normal afternoon thunderstorm, which juts up into our backyard. And there have been other cases, but I didn't care to bring 50 sets of different pictures for each one of the council members. So I just brought one before and after of a normal rainstorm. And, thank you.
Thank you. Next speaker, please. Anyone else for this public hearing? Seeing no one, I close the public hearing, open it up to council members for questions or comments.
I have a question. What was the reason why the applicant went with the residential multifamily instead of a different zoning category, since it was conditioned down to 8 units per acre?
I can certainly have the applicant speak to that, but you do get more flexibility with the density rather than going with transitional residential.
Right.
Conditional use would cap the density at 6. So by going to residential multifamily, you get 12 dwelling units per acre with that zoning district. And then it was conditioned so that it would meet the minimum density.
Okay.
Other questions or comments?
I just have a quick question. I noticed that this developer now has 2 properties looking, this will be the second one on Stevens Road. We often see the second property come in, both of them are underneath the traffic study. I mean, this happens time and again. We don't have anything currently within our ordinance besides lowering the threshold.
No, not at this time. We do have regulations that don't let you phase the development to avoid a traffic study, but there's nothing in the ordinance regarding a rezoning as the properties are coming in.
So if Mr. Chadwick came in with another one of the abutting properties, should this one be, and I'm just saying, but if this one moves forward with a rezoning and does it again, and, we just have this continuous small pieces that don't require a TIA, is that correct? Is there anything that any recommendations staff has for this? I mean, especially when we have these small ones. We've seen this quite a bit, and we see it with infill all the time. Do you all have any recommendations?
We can certainly, I'm going to ask our engineer, Mr. Jensen, to speak to that.
It's true, we don't have anything currently that prohibits during rezoning, piecemealing it, so to speak, but during a subdivision or site plan stage, if we have adjacent properties that have some maybe unique conformity to each one, that could fall under our subdivision ordinance, which if they meet certain thresholds of size, say more than 100 lots, that would be a site plan that would have to come back to council for a quasi-judicial hearing. So you would, in some cases, if it met some certain standards about how they are somehow tied together, that could be a scenario that they would have to come back to here for review.
Thank you.
Follow-up question. Oh, I'm sorry. Go ahead.
No, go ahead, Jen.
No, I'm good.
I just had a general comment. I'm sure Mr. Chadwick will be following up on his commitment to have these conversations with the residents. It sure seems like it's necessary. And in my case, I know when I first looked at the staff report and I saw multifamily zoning on Stevens Road, my first thought was there must be another Stevens Road in Cary. Unfortunately, there isn't. So there's a lot of convincing, I think, that needs to be done.
Yeah. And may I go back to my questions about the residential multifamily conditional use? Can you tell me if there are any other differences besides the 6 units that you get in the the transitional residential conditional use zoning category and RMFCU as far as buffer widths or open space obligations or anything like that? I just don't. know, and if this is something you want to just send to me in an email.
Sure, I can let you know the streetscape buffer requirement's the same for both. It's a 30-foot streetscape when it's along a thoroughfare. The density was the big issue. Transitional residential is a maximum of 6 dwelling units per acre, and with RMF, it's 12. The other, excuse me, other issues are pretty similar. Lot width for the townhomes, 20 feet. Setbacks are pretty similar. So I'll follow up with the other details with you.
Okay.
But the main issue is the density.
Okay.
So you'd have a cap of 6 if you went with TR.
Okay, that's very helpful. I appreciate that.
Mrs. Smith? Yeah, along the lines that Ms. Bush was talking about, the area is like the eye of a hurricane, and part of our problem with this whole area is you go a mile up the road and you've got the Raleigh border and you got 5,000 units. And if you just go by Swift Creek Elementary, overnight there's hundreds and hundreds of high density put in. So the area is under siege. And when we look at these one by one, we kind of lose sight of that. That's, you know, that's the problem. And I know traffic's always a concern, but, you know, looking at the pictures and looking at, listening to the comments that came tonight, my concern is that we look at small parcels and we apply a stormwater standard that may not be right for the area. So I think that's what I heard from that one citizen. I think we need to look at that very, very closely. And this is our last chance to get it right for that transition to Crossroads and that whole Raleigh area that abuts up to Crossroads. And it's all these piecemeals. And all I'm saying is I'm going to look long and hard at the density, and I want to see some kind of mitigation to these stormwater things that impact basically Wellington, which is right down the street.
I want to follow up on your water issue. The good news is I live about a mile from there, and so do you. I pass this place multiple times a day. I had to stop for the school bus at Stevens and Piney Plains this morning. I know exactly what they're talking about, exactly when it comes. So I'm very, very familiar with this. We had a rezoning, and I can't remember how long ago it was, just slightly to the northeast of here. And at that time, we did some extensive analysis, or at least I got information about the stormwater issue. And what we found were several things. One, guidelines in the 90s and when a lot of these houses were built were much less. Two, a lot of these houses that are having issues are built in a floodplain. Three, US 1 was widened without any restrictions, and they don't care and they don't have to because they override anything we say and do. So you combine all that together and you have an issue. And that's what we're dealing with. And then we said, well, how much does it cost to fix this? And it was multiple millions of dollars to fix this. And that was the last I heard of it. So we probably need an update on that. But I do remember that much, that it's a mess and it costs a lot of money. Another thing I remembered was that proposal that was rezoned started off with a required 5-year retention pond, 5-year flood retention pond, whatever, storm event. And they ended up, I think, with 100 or something like that. And I'm going off memory. I don't know what, but it was something really elaborate. And, you know, I don't know where that goes, but, you know, that's probably what, you know, someone needs to consider when we're addressing these water issues. Then I want to hit some of the issues that I have before we send it on to planning and zoning, and I think you want to speak to. The land use is medium density residential, and for those that don't know, that means 3 to 8 units an acre. So we're butting right up against the ceiling of that. And to me, that's what is the best use for the property is what the question we're being asked. What is the best use of that property? And our plan says 3 to 8. It doesn't say 8. It says 3 to 8. And you have to take into account all the things that are around you. And I think based on all the things that are around this, 8's probably not good for me. You're going to have to come down a lot more than 8 to get my support. Another thing that's going on with this proposal that I want everybody to understand, it has a valid protest petition. And what that means when it comes back to a council vote, it takes 6 of us to approve it. So that makes it really, really difficult for this developer. He has a huge mountain to climb. I've heard concerns expressed there, here. So he's got 4 council members expressing concerns, and all the neighbors, and like one said, I think it was Ms. Kaminsky, they're miles apart. So this is a huge mountain to climb. And I'm not saying give up by any means. I'm just saying that there's a lot of work to be done, and keep having those meetings and keep working with people. And hopefully we'll get something better out of this.
It's been a very interesting and different public hearing than I'm kind of used to. We've had speakers get up and speak that are typically coming to oppose a project, speak in support, and then people that have spoken in the past that typically support projects come speak against. So it's been a little interesting to hear that, but you hear a lot of the concerns, stormwater, traffic, loss of wildlife, so on and so forth, density. Density is the issue. You reduce the density, you reduce the traffic. You reduce the density, you reduce the stormwater runoff. You reduce the density, you keep more trees. So I would agree with your comments that, yeah, it's medium density, that's what the plan calls for, but it is at the high end of it. In an area that is typically very low density in a lot, and would even consider a little rural piece of heaven there. You know, it's, to me, that is the issue. Your comments are spot on. There is a valid protest petition. Requires supermajority of council, 6 of 7 of us to say yes. If some of these concerns are not addressed, I would pretty much consider this thing dead on arrival when it came back. So the developer has his work to do, but so does the community. I would encourage both sides to continue to work together. You know, see if there's something that you all can do to come up with something that you all can live with. Developer is going to have to give something in order to get our support, but the residents might also have to give something so that the project can continue to move forward. If you're expecting the developer to go, okay, I'll just build 12 single-family homes, that's not going to happen. So my advice would be to focus on what's most important to you all. Is it the traffic? Is it, you know, what are your 1 or 2 hot button issues? See if you can address those, and then what can we best do to mitigate some of the others? You know, some of the stormwater could be, you know, as simple as a bigger retention pond. Could be some new technologies that we aren't really aware of, don't know. But I would just encourage you all to continue to work together. Because if this comes back and the developers reduced the density and done this for traffic and this for stormwater and made all these concessions, and I feel like he's put his best effort forward, but I see no compromise on the side of the residents, I'm probably going to side with the applicant. But if I don't see the developer willing to work with the neighborhood or willing to, you know, come down on the density or things like that, then no, I'm probably going to vote against the applicant. So I guess what I'm trying to say is compromise is a two-way street. You can't expect one side to give and the other side not. So continue to work together. You got a lot of work to do. I guess this one goes to planning and zoning from here, so have fun, guys.
Other comments?
I'll just make a quick follow-up comment. I mean, it's my understanding that the laws in Cary require a developer to retain all the stormwater runoff when he develops, so that it is no greater runoff than before construction.
They have to attenuate back to pre-development conditions and mitigate to the 1, 2, 5, and 10-year storm events.
And that's regardless of whether it's 3 units per acre or 8 units per acre.
Correct.
Okay, so I think that's a really important fact for people to know, because that, I don't remember when that happened, it was like 2005 or something like that, that standard was raised, but it does call the developer to be more environmentally responsible, and it really won't mean that there's going to be a huge difference between 8 units per acre or 3 units per acre because of the standards of retention.
The obligations are still there. They still have to comply with the ordinance.
Yeah.
And one other point of clarification, just for the sake of some of the citizens that were concerned about the staff report, that is a staff report. We've produced it in the planning department. References to there not being floodplain That's based on a GIS map. The applicant's required to have field determination. So if there's floodplain, wetlands, those are things that will be identified at the time the development plan is submitted, regardless of what that plan ends up being. So
That's a very important clarification. The other clarification I want to add to this real fast is, and I'm sorry to make this clarification because I think it's a sad state of where we are right now, but my observation on development practices at this time is whether you have 5 units per acre or you have 8 units per acre, most developers are mass clearing their land. And if you say, oh, it has beautiful trees, and if we got a lower density, we'd be able to save more of those trees, I would not count on it. It's just unfortunate, but that's sadly the state that we're in these days. The only way to have trees preserved is for a condition to be put in there that says certain areas are preserved in the zoning, but it's just the way it is these days, and it's a sad practice, but it's reality. So I want everybody to be aware of that so that you don't get your hopes up and say, oh, we got less density and this is going to be so great, now we'll have more trees saved, and then the bulldozers come in and you lose it anyway. So I just want everybody to be aware.
Mr. Smith.
Yeah, I think you make a good point that in today's world, we have the conditions where any development that happens has to make sure they do not add to the stormwater problem. The point again that I'd want to make is this area developed very quickly in the early days of our fast growth. So you're talking about the early 80s, late 70s. And it was where Cary violated its own plans and allowed these developments, these residential developments in an area, we're going back to the 70s now, but we're going in an area where we had planned for it not to be that, so we wouldn't have these problems. So my point is that this is the dilemma we have. The developer may come up and mitigate that stormwater, but even doing so, with all the problems surrounding it, it's a mess.
Well, his job is not to improve the situation, he's just not to.
Understand.
Yes, and that's what you're saying, so I just wanted to, make that point.
Other
That's
comments
exactly right.
from council? I'm sorry, the public hearing is closed and I cannot allow you to speak. If I do, I have to allow everybody to speak. You can contact us through the town clerk or by sending us an email, calling us, but I can't allow you to speak again. I'm sorry. Ms. Grannon, anything else?
I was going to let the citizen know that the staff's information is in the staff report and on the website as well if they've got questions about the report or the process.
So and for those that are here this evening, if what is being proposed changes between now and the time it goes to the Citizen Advisory Board, called the Planning and Zoning Board, then that means there will be a public hearing at that meeting. And we anticipate that to be...
That depends on...
Depends on whether they change it or not.
Right.
So if they change the proposal, it might be, this is September.
November at the earliest. Mhm.
Yeah, November at the earliest. So please stay tuned, and if you have questions, please contact us or contact staff, and we'll let you know when the public hearing is. And after it meets the Planning and Zoning Board, it usually comes to the council a month after that.
Correct.
So we're talking about early next year before we'll probably see it. Okay, anything else? Thank you, Ms. Grannon. We now move to item 5.3, Indian Wells Properties rezoning request. Once again, we're going to hear from our staff, and then we're going to allow the applicant to explain the request and conduct a public hearing. There will not be action from the council this evening. Instead, we'll refer this to the Planning and Zoning Board. Ms. Grannon.
Thank you. This property is going to look familiar to you. This is 29.45 acres located on Indian Wells Road. Subject property is highlighted here in yellow. Southeast of Cameron Pond development. The land use plan designation is medium density residential and parks and open space. And the existing zoning is R8, residential 8 conditional use. Just recently, there was a rezoning adjacent to the property, which was also R8 conditional use. That previous rezoning for the subject property included an exhibit that showed a perimeter buffer along the western property line. It also showed some permanent open space in green, and then this hatched area is a 20-foot perimeter buffer. The request is to remove the buffer only for this area highlighted in red. The adjacent property is the Flint property that was just rezoned R8 conditional use. They would like to include that parcel as part of this development. So that's simply what the request is to remove that. Adjacent property owners within 800 feet were notified. We had to notify within 800 feet of the entire area because this was all part of a conditional use zoning. Well, that did trigger a lot of phone calls to staff about making sure that open space wasn't going away. I got a protest petition about an hour before the public hearing. It wouldn't have been valid, but we realized in the future when we send a notification, now I'll include a map like that one I just showed you with the arrow and the red on it, because it would have, an hour on the map would have saved me a couple of hours on the phone. So. But the area in question is just that portion right there adjacent to the Flint property. So when I did the staff report, or when I did the PowerPoint presentation yesterday, there were no protest petitions, and there were just a couple of inquiries. That changed today. I did get a lot of phone calls and got one invalid protest petition, but I think it's been clarified, so hopefully there won't be an issue. So this concludes staff's presentation. I'll call upon the applicant now to add any comments if they have anything, and then be available for your questions.
Very good. Would the applicant please come forward? Or is the applicant here?
Did not see the applicant tonight.
Okay. We'll go ahead and open the public hearing and invite the first speaker who would like to speak on this rezoning request. Anyone at all? Seeing no one, we'll close the public hearing, open it up to council members for questions or comments. Seems pretty straightforward to me. They want to make a change.
Yep.
They're like uses, no need for the buffer there, so.
And this needs to go to planning and zoning?
It's going through the entire process to get rid of that buffer, so.
Okay, just wanted to make sure.
Well, this is what happens when a little piece of your property lags behind. So it's unfortunate for them, but.
Okay.
At least it's coming to us now before they've built something on the other one, and, you know.
Well, this will go to the Planning and Zoning Board, and we'll see this sometime in the future. All right.
Thank you.
Thank you, Ms. Grannon. That takes us to discussion items. Our first item is item 6.1, the evaluation of development standards for infill sub-district of Walnut Street Corridor Transitional Zoning District.
Say that 3 times.
Mr. Nicholas will present this item, and council may take action. Mr. Nicholas.
Okay, thank you. This report is in response to a council request that staff review the existing zoning standards for the infill sub-district of the Walnut Street Corridor Transitional Zoning District and present potential changes that might better facilitate future development within this sub-district. The Corridor Transitional, or CT, zoning district encompasses property on both sides of Walnut Street, roughly between the Cary Town Center Mall and the entrance to U.S. Highways 1 and 64. Properties in the overall district are classified into one of 3 sub-districts. These include redevelopment, infill, or conversion. This map shows the overall CT district and the different sub-districts. The arrows show the location of the only 2 parcels that are designated as infill. Each of these parcels is about 11 acres in size. One of the parcels is the site of the town's Walnut Street Park. The other is a privately owned parcel and is currently in residential use with approximately 27 manufactured homes. And it's this privately owned parcel that was the focus of staff's evaluation of the standards. Just to provide some context for the area that we're focusing on, this is an aerial view of the subject property in the infill sub-district. The line cutting across the parcel represents 300 feet from Walnut Street. And the reason for pointing this out is that some of the regulations and standards for the first 300 feet are different from those for the area beyond the 300 feet. And I'll explain some of these differences in a little more detail in a minute. However, as you can see from this picture, at least 2/3 of the property is greater than 300 feet from Walnut Street. Since being asked to review the standards in the LDO, staff met on several occasions with representatives for the owner of the subject property to discuss a potential development project. These discussions allowed staff to gain a better understanding of the specific aspects that are challenging to redevelopment. Based on these discussions, staff put together a list of specific development standards for consideration that would need modification in order to facilitate redevelopment of the property in line with the owner's objectives. The current standards, potential changes, and supplemental information from staff is included in the staff report. I'll briefly review some of the standards that are listed here on the slide before turning things back over to council for discussion. The first item that needs to be considered is the uses that are permitted in the infill sub-district. Based on the current standards, there are only 3 options for residential development within this sub-district. These include detached dwellings, multifamily dwellings, and live-work units. And as you can see, the multifamily and live-work units are only allowed within the first 300 feet of that sub-district. Detached dwellings are allowed in the area beyond 300 feet. Adding another residential use type such as townhomes would provide greater flexibility than what currently exists in the regulations, although consideration should also be given to the density that would be allowed for this type of use. This slide shows a table of permitted uses for the CT district. You can see from the chart, when you look at the rows that are highlighted in red, there are a lot of options for uses within the first 300 feet from Walnut Street. However, the remaining area beyond 300 feet, there are only 5 uses that are allowed. 3 of these are non-residential and include religious assembly, public parks, and town-owned and operated facilities. So for approximately 2/3 of this property, there's very limited redevelopment opportunities other than detached dwellings. The next development standard that needs to be considered is perimeter buffers. In the infill subdistrict, there's a 40-foot type A buffer that's required within the first 300 feet from Walnut Street, and a 25-foot type A buffer beyond that distance. And the potential change that we would suggest consideration of is a 20-foot type A buffer for the entire infill subdistrict. And this slide just helps illustrate what's under consideration with this item. The green shaded area represents the buffers that are required within the existing CT regulations. The red dashed line shows the change that's being proposed. In considering a change to this standard, council may want to consider having different buffer widths depending on whether residential or non-residential uses are developed. And this slide just gives a little bit better view of the difference in the buffer widths within that first 300 feet. Next item for consideration is the requirement for buffer wall. This is in addition to the planting requirements for buffers. The wall must be constructed of masonry materials such as brick or stone, must be a minimum of 8 feet in height, and include evergreen plantings along the wall. To facilitate redevelopment, you're being asked to consider removing the requirement for a masonry wall. Council may wish to consider this requirement for a wall in relation to the allowed uses and consider different requirements depending on whether the property is developed for residential or non-residential development. Next item for consideration is the minimum lot width. LDO currently requires a minimum lot width of 50 feet for development within the infill subdistrict. This seems consistent with the requirements for detached dwellings. The proposal would be to change this to 34 feet. And if council is considering changing the regulations to permit townhomes, you may want to consider changing the minimum lot width requirement as well. Other zoning districts that are outside the CT district that allow townhomes usually require about a minimum of 20-foot lot width. So. The next item to consider is the minimum building setbacks. As you can see from the slide, the current standard requires side and rear setbacks to be at least 25 feet and doesn't require a front setback at all. In reviewing this standard, staff's not sure that this considers the potential for residential uses like detached dwellings, which are currently allowed. Staff believes these current standards are more consistent with non-residential uses, so staff believes changes should be made to the current ordinance to specify the different setbacks for residential development such as detached dwellings. If attached dwellings, such as townhomes, are also considered, then setbacks more consistent with that type of use should be considered. The potential changes shown here on the slides are an example of the setbacks listed in the LDO for townhome uses outside of the CT district. Since writing the staff report, staff has met with the representatives of the subject property regarding future development potential, and at this time, staff would suggest consideration of a rear setback of the 3 feet and not the 20 feet that was listed in the staff report. And this is more consistent actually with the setback requirements for townhomes that are outside the CT district. Next standard we looked at was consideration of the minimum separation between buildings. Currently, the LDO requires groups of attached residential buildings to be separated by at least 16 feet. The proposal here is to only require a minimum of 6 feet. Any concerns that there would be regarding proximity of buildings and safety can be addressed through building code requirements. Next item we looked at was visitor parking. Currently, the ordinance requires 1 space for every 4 dwelling units. The potential change here would be just to not require visitor parking in this district. And last standard we looked at was the standard for flag lots. The proposed redevelopment of the subject property may require the creation of a certain number of flag lots. Currently, the LDO only permits flag lots when certain criteria are met. Approval of these types of lots are handled as part of the site and subdivision plan review. Based on a preliminary review, the site does not appear to meet the criteria for flag lots. Therefore, if redevelopment of the property were to include these types of lots, the current criteria in the LDO would need to be modified to allow that. And this slide just shows some of the criteria that are, shows when flag lots are permitted. Some examples would be to utilize irregularly shaped land or land with severe topography, or to provide for the protection of significant natural and cultural resources. So if council wishes to consider some of these changes to the LDO standards that we just looked at, staff also requests direction regarding the process associated with making those changes. This slide lists some of the possible options. First option would be to use the typical LDO amendment process. This would involve a public hearing before council. However, there is no mailed notification to nearby properties. The second option, which is what staff recommends for the reasons that we've outlined in the staff report, would be to follow the typical LDO amendment process, but also send notice of the public hearing on the proposed amendment to property owners within 800 feet of the infill subdistrict. And the third option could be to conduct some type of community meeting to collect feedback prior to holding a public hearing on the proposed amendments. So to summarize, staff seeking direction on the following things. First, whether or not we should pursue any proposed changes to the LDO standards that were presented there this evening. And the second would be the process to follow for considering any of those changes. And that concludes our presentation, and I've provided a table here that summarizes the standards we just discussed, so help with your discussion.
Thank you.
Okay.
He just
Mr.
created
France
your
just
exact
created that
chart right here. Perfect.
He's writing them all.
Good work.
He was
Yeah.
writing them all down.
Maybe you want to speak to
I can read yours a lot better. What do you want? You want us to go one at a time? One.
Yeah,
The only one I have,
Not a public
a little bit of heartburn with is flag lots, and because I hate flag lots, I kind of would have to need to better understand how the site could be laid out in order to be okay or not okay with the flag lots. Beyond that, I think a lot of the other recommendations are reasonable or at least worth going forward to public hearing. I like staff recommendation of noticing people within 800 feet.
Right, right. I think when we were going through this, it's almost counterintuitive where you're seeing us trying to minimize things where we try to usually have greater buffers and so forth. But this was a grand experiment many, many years ago where we were trying to do something in that land. So for example, the Great Wall of China, we created the wall around. That was basically because in the vision we had for trying to have this mixed use going down the Walnut Street corridor, we recognized there might be some very extreme incompatible uses with the adjacent neighborhoods, and to address their concerns, you know, we created all of these very stringent guidelines, the walls, the aggressive buffers and so forth. So here we have a unique situation where we have the opportunity to have something that's more compatible. So you don't need that, and it's more consistent with, almost like that little buffer thing we looked at just a second before, where you're going to have uses that are somewhat similar. And there's no precedent here because we're looking at this just for this LDO. So, you know, one of the things we brag about is we try new things and we revisit them after several years. And with the other changes that have gone on in that area, it's time to revisit this one. And here's an opportunity for this one little odd piece that we can really bring something to the area that revitalizes the area, brings in some revenue and complements the area. So again, I was taken aback by some of the changes, but when you think about it, it's more similar use to similar use, and I think for this situation, these make sense. I do agree that it is a change. We need that public hearing process. We need people to fully understand what's going on, and I'm just not even going to comment about flag lots. I'm going to let Don do all that.
Ms. Robinson.
Right, you know, looking at these different things, a lot of these I do not have any heartburn with. I will say that not having any visitor parking, I think, is a mistake. I have some communities in my district that are townhome communities with no visitor parking, and it is chaotic, given the fact that this area is right off of Walnut Street, if you had visitors, there's nowhere to spill over for these cars to park. You can't park on Walnut Street. So I think it's a mistake if we take away visitor parking. The other thing is the 3 feet for the building setback. I mean, this desk is deeper than 3 feet. I mean, to me, that may be just a little bit too much.
Too little.
What?
Too little.
Too little.
It's little, yeah. Too much of a request, too little of a buffer or setback. Yeah, I'm a little nervous about that. I don't have the same passion about flag lots because I've seen it done well, so I'm not really too concerned about that, but I respect your concern over that. And I think we may end up asking, I think we may end up, if we put this out for public hearing, which I believe we should, we may end up hearing from adjacent residents who say, well, not a wall, then what about a fence? And I think we should just be open to that.
Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah, I'm sorry.
Oh, go ahead. You started.
Okay. If I were channeling Counselor Adcock, I would say it's all about the process, right? And I think we should continue with our standard LDO process and get feedback from the citizens. I think 12 years ago, I guess it was when this came up, 2002, I can't imagine we would have created a great wall of Cary around this, around this area. I think I wasn't on.
Don was on council when we did the wall?
The wall requirements and stuff, and then I remember Irv bringing it back to try to change that.
I think that was an amendment to this. I think the original.
There was an amendment back in 2008 that
Yeah.
you
So it's
you had looked at these standards back in 2008.
Added the wall?
You clarified what the materials had to be.
Okay.
So the wall was already in there.
I remember it.
Yeah, we did. I'm sorry to interrupt you.
Yeah, no, I was just trying to think of somewhere, anywhere in Cary where I've seen an 8-foot tall masonry, freestanding masonry wall, right? I just can't even imagine the cost of that would be insurmountable. So I'd like to see consistency across Cary, right? I'd like to see that if a developer builds an infill development somewhere where we want to see redevelopment, this would be a perfect area, that it's consistent with other areas in other, I don't think we should put extra restrictions, for instance, in this particular area, unless it, council and the citizens around there feel there's a special reason for that, and I'd love to know what those are. I think, I agree with you, visitor parking, I have seen some of the townhome communities that without visitor parking, it can be somewhat strained. But I've also seen it where they put, I think we've seen some developments where they've got, the garage and then a lot of parking in front that you don't need it. But, I could go either way. But I definitely, channeling Gail, I would say it's all about the process, make sure everybody's heard.
Mr. Johan.
I had the opportunity to chat with the applicant's representative just prior to this meeting tonight, and I had a concern about flag lots, and he pulled out a new revised plan that must be very recent, and it eliminated the need for flag lots. So, I don't know where that's going to go down the process. He's probably going to share it with staff, but it's possible that we don't have to worry about the flag. If we do, I don't like them, but I don't think we're going to have to worry about it.
Yeah,
And he also had, on this new plan, had additional parking. I don't know if it meets the requirements for visitor parking. We didn't get into the math, but there was
something.
There was additional parking in certain areas. So we may not have a problem with that, so that's a good thing.
Yeah, I think, I'm sorry, go ahead. I thought you were.
The concerns I did have for him, the perimeter buffer, 20 feet rather than, I think normally outside of this area, it would be 40 feet between townhomes and single family. Would that be?
Typically, based on the size of the lots that surround this infill district, you'd probably be required to have a 40-foot buffer.
Because the lots, single-family lots are larger in size. So they're only proposing 20. He explained to me that usually it's 40-foot with 20 and 20, and these lots were old and they had no buffer at all, so he would have to give all 40 feet, so that's why he's giving 20, and it was a good explanation. I don't know if I'm thoroughly on board with that, but it was a good explanation of why that number is the way it is. And the only concern I had left was the separation between the buildings. Normally, it's 16 feet, townhome developments, and they're requesting a change to 6.
For density.
Here, for density's sake. So that's the one I have a little issue with. The rest of them, I think I'm okay with.
And I think it's important for us to remember, we do have someone who has expressed interest in developing this site, but the changes that we make go with the land, do not go with the developer. And we really need to set our standard and then let that development fit our standard versus us fitting our standard around the development. And so I just encourage us to do that.
Well said. How about a motion?
Well, the thing about the visitor parking, I saw that same plan where that, and I guess the conceptual model is that you have much greater driveways where we have problems with that visitor parking, usually the short driveways. But, well said on, we create the standard, and you're right, this looks like something that would be really good for this area, but we've got to make sure that we can't design things for one developer. I understand that.
Okay.
Make a motion that we send these or direct staff to bring these recommendations forward for a public hearing, notifying residents within 800 feet. Was that right?
Standard process.
Okay, there's a motion.
800.
I'll second.
And a second. Discussion, Mr. Yara?
Well, just to clarify that of your three options there, notifying within 800 feet, that doesn't necessarily mean there's a public hearing. Is that correct?
No, there'll be a public
There would
hearing
be?
on the proposed ordinance amendment, so typically we don't notify people, but in this case, we will notify people within 800 feet just of the infill district,
All right.
that there'll be a hearing and what the changes are.
Other
And based
comments?
on the feedback we get, we may or may not amend these numbers.
Yeah.
Okay. We have a motion and a second. All in favor?
Aye.
Any opposed? Motion carries unanimously. Thank you, Mr. Nicholas. We now move to item 6.2, the rezoning of the Stitt property south. Is there first a motion to remove this item from the table?
So moved.
There's a motion.
Second.
And a second. Discussion. All in favor, please say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? We have removed it, and we're ready to review it. Mr. Ramage is going to give us a staff report. Mr. Ramage.
All right, thank you. This is a request to rezone approximately 48 acres on Green Hope School Road and Sears Farm Road. The site, as you may recall, is located on the south side of Green Hope School Road, about 1,500 feet to the west of Highway 55, and it's immediately on the east side of Sears Farm Road. So here's a closer zoom-in view of the site. You can see that to the east of the site is the Highcroft Village PDD. To the west of the site is the Highcroft PDD and the Sears Farm Road Park and Elementary School. And to the south is the Reserve Subdivision. According to Cary's GIS maps, the central portion of the site and the southern portion are potentially impacted with stream buffers. However, as usual, precise determination of these will occur at the time of site plan. Existing zoning for the three subject parcels is currently R40. The site is also within the Jordan Lake Watershed Overlay District. This slide also shows the boundaries of the three adjacent planned development districts, namely Highcroft Village, Highcroft, and Friar PDD. The applicant has requested a zoning of transitional residential district conditional use. And the applicant has proposed a number of zoning conditions. We'll go over these. And for land uses, the site would be limited to detached housing and to neighborhood recreation. Maximum density limited at 2.99 homes per acre. Their initial proposal at the first public hearing was 3.6. Minimum lot size adjacent to the reserve is 11,000 square feet. That was 10,000 square feet at the first hearing. And next to the stream buffer adjacent to the reserve, 8,000 square foot minimum lot size, which is an increase from 7,000 square feet at the first hearing. There's a number of zoning conditions for this site that are particular to different locations around the perimeter of the site. So to kind of make this a little more intelligible to follow, I'm going to go through piece by piece of the adjacent property. So first, along Sears Farm Road, there is a condition that there would be a 30-foot Type B streetscape buffer for the part of Sears Farm Road that's opposite Highcroft. That, in fact, would match Highcroft. Highcroft also has a 30-foot streetscape buffer. Moving south on that western border, we get to the reserve. So adjacent to the reserve subdivision, they have offered conditions for special buffers and, in some cases, lot sizes. So in this slide, you see the green area is the portion of the reserve north of the stream buffer, and there the applicant is proposing a 40-foot buffer with adjacent lots of at least 11,000 square feet in size. In addition, the nearest home would be set back an additional 30 feet. We've zoomed in a little bit here so you can see what this might look like. So this slide shows the zoom in. First, you can see that the first 30 feet would be a type A buffered. Beyond that, there would be a 10-foot zone that would be open space that would also have a fence in it. The applicant has stipulated this would be a 6-foot tall opaque fence. So 30 feet of buffer, then 10 feet of open space with the fence somewhere located within that. We move now and take a look at the building setback is then 30 feet beyond that. So you have a grand total of about 70 feet from the reserve before you could have the first home foundation. The other part that's adjacent to the reserve is next to a stream buffer that separates the properties. The condition offered in this location is that lots would be at least 8,000 square feet in size, immediately adjacent to the stream buffer. Now we're kind of going in a counterclockwise direction. Moving slightly to the east, adjacent to Highcroft Village PDD, the applicant has proposed a 50-foot buffer with an evergreen screen and a fence. It's worth noting, in addition, Highcroft Village PDD has a 20-foot buffer inside the PDD itself. Lots in Highcroft Village, incidentally, range from about 5,000 to 6,000 square feet, so that will be consistent or slightly smaller than the average minimum lot size of 7,000 feet offered in the subject property. So if we zoom in on that particular buffer, the applicant has proposed that of the 50-foot buffer, the first 40 feet would just be undisturbed open space. Behind that, there would be a 10-foot zone where there would be an evergreen screening that would be planted and a fence. The subject site also contains the historic Sears House, which dates from about the turn of the century, 1900 to 1910. This house is listed in the Wake County and Town of Cary architectural and historic inventories. And the applicant has offered a zoning condition that stipulates that the Sears House will be moved to a location on the west side of the property, facing Sears Farm Road and the Sears Farm Park across the street. This site would also be adjacent to stream buffer. The historic character of the house would be protected in perpetuity with a preservation easement. And that is also part of the condition that's offered. This map shows you an aerial where you can see in the northern part of the site where the house is today and the proposed general location of where the home would be relocated to. They're proposing actually to move it next to the stream buffer. So working in negotiation with Capital Area Preservation and the applicant, what they propose is to carve out a lot site facing Sears Farm Road, adjacent to the stream buffer. That way the view from the house would be Sears Farm Park, creates more open space. The house itself would benefit from the adjacent open space of the stream buffer. So even with a smaller lot size, you could get the sense of a larger lot doing their best to try and keep the house in context, keeping it in a less intense context than if it was kept in the location where it currently sits. So details of this condition were developed over the last several weeks in concert with the applicants and Capital Area Preservation. Conditions also have been offered that incorporate the recommendations of the required traffic study, and there are quite a few of these. I won't go through them all. Many of them are summarized on this slide. Most of them have to do with adding turn lanes, westbound left turn lanes and Green Hope School Road at 2 locations, Sears Farm and site access point. There's stipulations about ingress and egress to the site itself. There are off-site mitigations, including an eastbound right turn lane on Green Hope School Road at NC 55 Highway. So if you're heading eastbound Green Hope School Road towards NC 55, there would be added an exclusive right. This map shows the protest petitions that were originally submitted. At the time of the first public hearing, we had 19 properties that had submitted protests. Most of those have been withdrawn. In purple, you see all the properties that have been withdrawn as the applicant has worked with the neighbors. So we no longer have a valid protest for the subject site. when the protest petitions were originally submitted, this slide shows you some of the comments that were made at that time, that the protest talked about the width of the buffer, whether it was sufficient, whether the density was too high. There was one concern about the extension of Enfield Ridge Road, and some gave no reason for that. So the applicant has worked specifically changing the buffer conditions, trying to offer mitigation on that transition. At the public hearing, a number of concerns were expressed at the first hearing, reflected the protest petition. There were concerns about the buffers next to Highcroft Village, the streetscape along Sears Farm Road, the transition from low to medium adjacent to the residential, and traffic safety in Edgemore. So you can see that the first three of those bullets have been the topic or the subject of the conditions that have been offered. The Planning and Zoning Board, at their meeting on March 17, recommended approval with a vote of 7-1. At that point, the case was referred back to Town Council, where it was subsequently tabled. Concern that Council expressed at your April 24th meeting included these 3 points: the impact of development activity in West Cary on the road network and schools, the historic resource on the site, namely the Sears House. And then there was concern at that time that some of the conditions offered weren't conditions that town could necessarily accept, that wouldn't be legal for the town to hold. And there were conditions that the town, we couldn't enforce if they were done. So some of what has happened since then is those conditions have been the ones that were not legal for the town to accept or that would have posed problems on enforcement have been taken out. My understanding is there is a private agreement between those adjacent homeowners in Highcroft Village PDD and the applicant that is not part of the rezoning. So since the last time you saw this case on April the 24th, this slide highlights the main changes that have happened. Since your last meeting, the applicant reduced the density from 3.6 to 2.99 units per acre, and we've provided the dwelling count. They've added a brand new condition that there is a minimum lot size, which is now 7,000 square feet across the entire site. For those lots I pointed out earlier next to the reserve, the minimum lot size was increased to 10,000 to 11,000 square feet. For the portion of the reserve that is next to that stream buffer on the southern edge of the property, the minimum lot size was increased from 7,000 to 8,000 feet. New condition was righted to do that exclusive right turn lane onto 55 from Greenup School Road. And lastly, the last new condition was the preservation of the Sears House with a requirement that the preservation easement be recorded. So this concludes our presentation. I understand Chris Raleigh, I think, spoke earlier, and the applicant's representative is here if you have questions.
Okay. Council.
I mean, I don't have any questions, just some comments.
Okay.
First, Scott, good to see you back. And I always enjoy your presentations, always very detailed and lots of pictures that help illustrate what we're talking about. I always appreciate that. Gosh, I mean, I don't know that I can do much other than echo the applicant's comments when he spoke at Public Speaks Out. He's pretty much done everything I think that we've asked him to do.
We didn't ask him to do anything. For clarification, we didn't ask him to add any conditions. We just expressed our displeasure.
He addressed a lot of our displeasure.
Thank you.
Maybe not enough for some people, I don't know, but he darn sure addressed my displeasure. Zoning conditions, detached residential with recreation, worked with adjacent neighbors to get the protest petitions removed, private agreements with adjoining neighbors, property owners, reduce the density 30 units, larger lots, preserving the historic Sears House, adding a right turn lane that wasn't even identified in the traffic impact analysis, connecting a gap in our greenway. I don't see how we can say no to it. I would be worried about what might come along in a few years from now if we did. I think this is the best we're ever going to get, and I thank and applaud the applicant for all their efforts to work with the community.
I do have one question.
Okay.
If we're going to, I didn't want to stop anyone from making. Okay, so with respect to the Greenway, can you bring up the Greenway map again?
Yes, hold on. I have that. I hid the Greenway slide.
I saw it on one.
Try and shorten this, but let's see. Here's a zoom in of the Greenway. You can see going through Highcroft PDD on the right-hand side of the slide, there is a street side trail that cuts through as it joins the stream buffer on the southern part of the property. You
Right.
have that leg that would be, when the site is developed, they would complete that part of the Greenway. Then it picks up again in the reserve.
So is there a connection, one of the things I talked with the applicant about, is there some sort of connection, a safe connection for children that might live in that site to get to Highcroft Drive without getting on a major street? Is that connection up north by Highcroft? Oh, you can't see where I'm pointing.
Oh, to get to Highcroft, are you talking about to get to the elementary school?
Right.
What, in terms of what would be the best crossing location, safe?
Yeah.
I might defer to Mr. Jensen. I'm not sure where.
And I wonder if that's in plan, because clearly there'll be a lot of kids in this neighborhood.
Actually did a walk to school there like 2 weeks ago.
Exactly.
Yeah,
I'm not sure where the.
I'm not sure where they are either, to be quite honest with you. I just haven't really studied the traffic pattern that would go to school from here, so I'm sorry, not really able to answer your question, but I'm assuming there's enough connectivity between the Greenway paths and the sidewalk system out there and logical crossings along Sears Farm Road that would get them to where they need to be.
Yeah, I mean, this is more of a comment for the applicant down the road and maybe for staff to work at. I'd like to see some sort of safe way within this development for kids to go to school rather than, cutting through yards all through this process. You can see, no matter where you put a sidewalk, if it's out of the way and kids are walking to school, they will find a shorter route.
That's true.
And those parents that are within the shorter route might not like it. So if the applicant, if this moves forward, could work, that would be great. Thank you.
Mr. Ramage, I have just clarification, just to make sure I'm understanding. You went through minimum lot sizes, adjacent lot sizes, buffers, and I'll just ask a question in general. Are there any adjacent lots that are smaller than across the buffer?
Are there lots
I don't know
on the subject site that would be smaller?
Then what's across the buffer? And if you could tell me what those are. Because I'm understanding 11,000 minimum on the left side, 8,000 minimum up against Highcroft Village. Is that correct?
Yes, let me
And
pull up
those
that.
lot sizes are like 7,000 square feet, I think, or smaller. I just want to make sure I got that all correct.
Okay, for example, next to the reserve?
Yes.
Subdivision?
That's probably the one in question because those
Okay.
are the biggest lots.
Okay. But on the cul-de-sac, you see there where it's in the reserve that backs up to the portion where there would be the 40-foot.
I'm not talking about the buffer, just the
Okay.
lot sizes.
The lot size in the reserve, I looked those up before the meeting. They range from about a third of an acre to a half acre.
Okay.
In the reserve. And so the applicants proposed a minimum lot size of 11,000 square
That's
feet.
like an R11, okay.
Yeah.
That's what I was trying
And
to.
then if you go to the next, I'm going to go one past this. That next section that's north of the stream buffer, again, the lots that are on that north side of Briardale Avenue, I looked up and they're kind of consistent. They're more in the quarter acre
Quarter
to
to
third
third,
acre lot
yep.
size. And then it'd be 8,000
Very
across the
good.
street.
That's what I needed. Okay.
I just have a question. Mr. Ramage, could you go back to that original aerial view that
Yeah.
showed the different lots, parcels?
Would this be it?
That one's a little too close. The first one
Okay.
you showed us, I think is 75.
There?
There you go, yeah.
Okay.
So we can see all the different parcels here, except for we don't have the Lennar parcels shown on this map, correct? On Highcroft Drive extended to the north?
Highcroft Drive extension in the Friar PDD? Right, because we haven't put in, there's nothing platted yet at this point or would have showed up. Yeah,
Right, so you
we
can't
didn't
until it's
put in.
platted. Remind us how many units that is over that area?
I don't have that information.
Okay.
I know it was done as a PDD district, so it's not it was a custom density for that, for each of the pods in Friar PDD.
Okay. What about the Meritage property that is to the east of 540 and south of Green Hope School Road? It's immediately to the west of Highcroft Drive, or Highcroft there. Do you know how many units are in that?
No, I'm afraid I don't.
Okay. The reservation I have is this, and I have articulated this at a couple different council meetings. I appreciate the applicant coming back and making changes based on the displeasure that was given. Not that we asked him to do anything, but I'm receiving comments from a lot of my citizens in District A expressing their consternation with how many units are being approved and houses being built in this area when we don't have adequate infrastructure to be able to support all the new residents. I don't know how many homes are going in that Meritage section or the Lennar section, but it's hundreds of units. And I have a lot of concern about the continual little drip in the bucket, drip in the bucket, drip in the bucket, where we keep adding to this problem where we really don't have sufficient infrastructure to be able to handle all the new residents out here. And so even though I appreciate the applicant coming back, trying to make concessions, I still don't feel like I can support this.
Okay. Other comments or questions? I can tell you that I rely heavily on the land use plan. And the question we have before us is this the best use of this land? And the land use plan's a low to medium density with most of it low. So I'm thinking that's 1 to 3 mostly. And they came in at 2.99, I believe, if that's correct. Mm-hmm. And they created buffers all around them. So then the issue gets to the infrastructure and the schools. I'll just say it. The county commissioners need to fund the schools, period. I mean, they have to fund our schools. We have given them information. We've supplied all the information they need. They have to fund the schools. They have the schools planned in the areas. That is their job, and they need to do it. Roads, we continue to struggle with the roads. I know we spent $22 million, I believe it was. This year, we're going to probably have to spend more next year. But that will continue to be an issue in this area, especially as it grows so fast. But I get back to the long-range vision, and what is the ultimate solution for this property. And while I don't like everything coming in at one time, and we can't stop growth legally, what I want to do is make sure it has the lowest density possible, and I think less than 3 units an acre is about as good as you're ever going to get. So that's how I'm looking at it, and I do feel for the school issue and especially the traffic that continues to mount in that area. Other comments, questions? Mr. Gerha?
Totally agree with you. But I do think this particular rezoning is extraordinarily well-conditioned. I mean, extraordinarily well-conditioned. I think we should all be happy about the house. I mean, this can certainly be an example we come across this so often. This can certainly be an example of what can be done with historic preservation. But beyond that, then you have the developers agreement, which, is separate with all of that laundry list. I mean, I really think what we have before us is really as good as we're going to get. So the question is, do we want anything there? Do we just want to say no and stop things because of the infrastructure problem? Or do we want to approve perhaps the best thing we could get? And with this one, I'm leaning toward approving.
My concern with the schools is I think we have to be consistent. I absolutely agree with your comment that we don't control the schools. The commissioners control the money around the school funding. I spoke with several school board members about this. I said, if this is rezoned, and I also spoke to the applicant about this, have you been given any guarantee on where these kids will go to school? I mean, the first thing we will hear when the first house goes in here, if there's still all the problems that we have with overcrowding, is I just bought a house and I can see the elementary school, but my kids can't go there. I mean, we hear that all the time. And that is a huge concern. if this is rezoned today and then it's platted and it's, moved on, we're talking about neighbors moving in a year and a half or so, maybe 2 years, probably at the earliest. There are several other elementary schools, one that is already funded, not being proposed not far. So I don't feel as bad on the elementary school side, but I do see exactly what you're saying, and I have that concern, and I do stress to all of the citizens, let your voices be heard, because we don't have control over the schools, and the few times that this council has tried to do some of things like that, they've been told that's not yours to do.
That's true.
So I want citizens to realize that, yes, we do have some control, but in making some decisions, but I do think that this is the best use of this land. I'd love to see some of these still low density, but more affordable homes for people to become part of Cary. And being so close to the school, I can see it being a perfect place for families.
I'll make a motion to approve 13 REZ 25.
There's a motion
A second.
and a second. Discussion. I just thought of another question. So if this failed, given that the land use plan says low density and medium density, can you come in with 8 units an acre? Does that fit low density to medium density?
You could do it on the medium density part.
Yeah. Okay. So they'd still have to
You
be
could put in a
1 to
request,
3.
you're not guaranteed.
Right. I'm just,
It's just like the Keller property. I mean,
Exactly.
for someone to articulate that that a office building could be put there
Yeah.
only if it was rezoned by the
Right.
council for that.
exactly.
Right.
Yeah.
I was just making sure where the boundaries are. That's what I do for a living, boundary condition test.
Oh, that's what you do.
Yeah.
I always wondered.
Now it makes
I always
sense.
wondered.
So we have a motion and a second. All in favor of the motion, please say aye.
Aye.
Those opposed?
No.
Motion carries 5-1.
Follow up with a motion to approve the comprehensive plan consistency statement for 13 REZ 25.
A second.
There's a motion and a second. Discussion. All in favor, please say aye.
Aye.
Those opposed?
I guess I'll be the opposed since I opposed the other thing, sorry.
Motion carries 5-1. Thank you, Mr. Ramage. We now move to item 6.4, the rezoning request for High House Road North. Staff's going to give us a report, and we're going to hear from the planning board. Ms. Grannon.
Thank you. This is a request to rezone approximately 27.44 acres located at 2420 and 2504 High House Road. Subject property is shown here, highlighted in yellow. Zoomed in aerial view of the subject property. Land use plan designation for the property is low density residential. And the existing zoning is residential 40. As part of this request, the applicant has asked to be removed from the mixed use overlay district. And they are asking for a zoning designation of transitional residential conditional use. The applicant's proposed conditions that would limit the use to detached residential and set a maximum density of 2.5 dwelling units per acre. This shows the subject property located on High House Road, which is an existing thoroughfare. And it also has an existing C-Tran route on it. At this time, I'd like to ask the Planning and Zoning Board Chair to come forward and deliver their recommendation.
Good evening, Mr. Mayor, Council. As you were just told, we voted 7-1 to recommend approval. I'm going to focus on the one, as I usually do. And surprise, surprise, the first thing was traffic. And a couple of things we observed about traffic. First of all, the applicant avoided a traffic study by limiting the number of homes, the number of lots to be developed to just underneath the threshold, which, is not necessarily wrong, but it does kind of indicate a gaming of the system. We had particular concerns with traffic impacts at High House and 55, and a concern about, because we're going to have a right-in, right-out into the development, that you're going to have U-turns. And, in a bad traffic situation, if you add U-turns, you're not going to make it better.
We, however, did point out that it is consistent with the land use plan. And we, I think, just recently revisited it to LDR, which suggests if we recently thought LDR was good, then LDR probably ought to still be good. We also did express a concern about schools. I mean, this is a reoccurring theme. You know, you're going to hear discussion of schools and traffic on just about everything we do west of 55, and so we're just going to have to get used to it. Our one member couldn't approve because, or couldn't recommend approval because of traffic.
Questions, comments? Motion?
I'll make a motion that we recommend, or that we approved REZ 14, or 14 REZO for High House Road North.
Second.
There's a motion, second. Discussion? All in favor of the motion, please say aye.
Aye.
Those opposed? Motion carries unanimously. Follow up?
Make a motion for the comprehensive plan consistency statement for 14 REZO for High House Road North.
Second.
There's a motion and a second. Discussion? All in favor, please say aye.
Aye.
Those opposed? Motion carries unanimously. And that takes us to item 6.6, bid award, Cary Raleigh Water System Mutual Aid Interconnection Project Phase 1. Mr. Hurt.
Good evening, Council. For your consideration is the bid award in the amount of $1,055,000 for the first phase of construction of the Cary Raleigh Water System Interconnection Project. This project includes numerous water improvements and connections along our southeastern border, as well as modifications to our Trinity Road pump station site. This construction project brings to fruition many of the elements agreed upon in our 2012 interlocal agreement with the City of Raleigh. It was with your direction that the town entered into this agreement with the City of Raleigh to provide even better service to our customers by establishing a mutual aid agreement for emergency water supply. This regional partnership allows us to send and receive water from Raleigh should the need ever arise. In addition to strengthening the interconnection with the City of Raleigh, this project completes the transfer of ownership from Raleigh to Cary of a 4.5-mile water line along Holly Springs Road. That water line begins at Tryon Road in the north and ends at 1010 Road in the south. The purchase of this water line benefits the town in many ways. It eliminates a parallel construction project in a crowded and difficult corridor. It strengthens the distribution network in our southern pressure zone. It reduces capital costs associated with a new water line installation, and it results in a physical connection with the town of Holly Springs. Although we do not have a mutual aid agreement with Holly Springs, this project has already spurred such dialogue. As we move forward with this and other initiatives, staff will explore expanding our regional partnership to include the town of Holly Springs. Any future interlocal agreement would, of course, be presented for your consideration. The Holly Springs Road water line will be incorporated into the town system by connecting it to existing town facilities that are already in close proximity. The one exception to this is along Penny Road, where a 4,500-foot water line extension will be necessary as part of this project. As a special note, this water line will provide service to the newly named Jack Smith Park. Staff recommends awarding this construction contract to Pipeline Utilities Incorporated in the amount of $1,055,000. I'm glad to answer any questions.
Thank you, Mr. Hurt. I can say that 15 years ago when I came on council, of course, you've been on decades longer than I have. We used to be at war with our neighbors, and it's nice to be working with our neighbors to take care of each other in case of emergencies. And this saves us in so many ways from creating duplicate water lines and everything. It's just a win-win all the way around, the way I see it. I don't know what other council members think, or if they just want.
Win-win. It's great.
Agreed.
Motion?
I'll make a motion oh, did you want to do it? It connects to Jack Smith Park.
Yeah.
Oh, so if we don't do this, then we can't do the park?
That's probably it.
I'm not going to make a...
I'll make a motion that we award the contract to Pipeline Utilities in the amount of $1,055,000.
There's a motion?
Second.
And a second. Discussion? All in favor, please say aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Motion carries unanimously. Thank you, Mr. Hurt.
Thank you, Council.
We now move to our next item, item 6.7, Council Initiator Request. Mr. Yerha will explain his item. Mr. Yerha.
This one, I think, is pretty straightforward. We recently created the Aging Issues Task Force with 7 members. We would like to, it's a short-term task force, Probably their mission will be over with sometime at the end of this year, if not certainly early in January of next year. We would like to add an additional member to the task force. If you recall, we each had the opportunity at the beginning to appoint someone, and Mr. Smith had passed on his opportunity at that time. So in conjunction with this request to increase the membership by one, I thought it would make sense to ask Mr. Smith to appoint whoever he would desire for this extra spot. And if we agree with that process, I'm not sure, but Mr. Smith may have a name even this evening for us to.
Okay, and before we get to Mr. Smith, Ms. Bush, you were the co-sponsor?
Yeah, I just,
Anything to add?
this is an interesting problem to have, that our seniors are so busy. Our seniors are, just active and so busy in the community that they just can't make enough meetings, and so we need somebody else. So what a great problem to have.
That's a great problem.
Mr. Smith, how about a nomination?
Do we have to approve this addition first, or can I make that as part of the
Probably
motion?
have to make that.
Yeah.
Or you can make it all in one motion, I think.
Right. I would recommend if that we add this person to the force, the task force, and I would recommend Martha Dickerson.
Second.
There's a motion and a second. Discussion? And for those that don't know, Martha Dickerson has been around as long as Jack, I think, as far as coming to this council meeting. She's very active, and she'll be a great addition.
She was a teenager back then, yes.
That's
Thank
right.
you.
And she has attended the first two
Yeah.
task force meetings as a member of the public.
And I hear she
Public
brings-
is encouraged to attend.
She brings pie or something to these meetings?
I don't know about that.
Yeah, she might now.
All in favor of the motion, please say aye.
Aye.
Those opposed, motion carries unanimously. Thank you. We now move to the item I pulled earlier. It's rezoning 14 RZ 11 Kensington Place. I pulled it from the consent just to, and I'll make this brief. Land use plan calls for low to medium density. I equate that to somewhere around 3 units an acre. What the applicant is proposing is 6 units an acre, and I think we could have done a better job and gotten it with a lower density. And that's my only reason for pulling it, is to vote against it because of that reason. So if council's ready to move on this and make a motion, I would entertain a motion.
Well, I would like to just,
Okay,
comment on
sure.
it. I think you bring up excellent points, and I agree very much with you in principle. I think the struggle here was just like the one we just approved a minute ago, and that is we've asked that developer to work with the community and work with the neighborhood. They did. They addressed all the concerns. So we're getting more of these where, it's just like the one previously that Ms. Jennifer voted against. Maybe the question we should be asking, why aren't these 1/3 acre lots instead of bragging about 11,000-foot acre lots? And I think this is the same thing. This area, the person met with the adjoining people, addressed their concerns. There's no protest, and so, I feel an obligation to support that, even though I agree very strongly in principle to what you just said, Mayor.
Okay. Other comments or a motion?
Make a motion to approve 14 REZ 11.
There's a motion. Is there a second?
Second.
And the second. Further discussion? All in favor of the motion, please say aye.
Aye.
Those opposed, no. Motion carries 5-1.
Follow up with a motion to approve the comprehensive plan consistency statement for our 14 REZ 11.
There's
Second.
a motion and a second. Discussion? All in favor, please say aye.
Aye.
Those opposed, no. Motion carries 5-1. That concludes what's on our agenda. I would entertain a motion to adjourn.
So
moved.
There's a
Second.
motion and a second. Discussion? All in favor, please say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? We are adjourned. Thank you.
This has been a production of Cary TV. Visit the Town of Cary's website at townofcary.org.